There doesn't seem to be any sound.
Gardening. I don't, it's just in my mind, there's a difference between gardening and farmland.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in that sense, it's less protecting areas of that could be available for gardening or sort of homesteading or something, and more actually allowing that are actually ensuring that our regulations allow for that on individual properties. I'm sort of leaning towards just removing the areas of prime farmland. And if you feel that it's still an important priority, potentially doing another bullet for food sustainability and things like that.
What do people think?
Exit.
Laura, did you catch some of that conversation? Or we're just talking about this question, you know, the mention of prime farmland in that last bullet. And whether that's yeah.
I didn't hear anything, but since the sound was turned on, but I'm fine axing that.
Okay.
Yeah. Michael, are you okay with that?
Yeah, other than what I mentioned about the garden plots, but you guys had already covered that.
Yeah. And I will say, so you'll notice that the bullet points don't cover every chapter. We can still have goals and objectives relevant to that specific chapter without rising to the level of sort of what I would consider the bullets are our priority goals rather than everything we might hope to accomplish.
I didn't say anything on the first bullet, when we talk about family and housing. And I shared that, document with you.
Yeah.
One of the big things in it was, I can speak for my adult family, kids, they don't have kids, they have no intention of having children. So there is a whole generation coming through. Instead of having families or large families, they're having no kids or only one or two. So that would have an impact on coming up with our school system too.
Yeah.
Just from, you know, not having the children in the first place.
Yeah.
Live outside of town. We need the families in the town, in the schools.
But they want to live, they want to live in town. They don't.
Well, I think this kind of gets back to what we've been talking about. So the smaller 1-bedroom and studio housing units, potentially this is where we say smaller 1-bedroom and studio housing units inclusive of older adults and young professionals who prefer that sort of style of living. The crossover between how, you know, older adults and younger professionals choose to live is it's a Venn diagram there. You know, when I was first out of college living in a studio apartment, my neighbors on both sides were retired people in their 70s, I think. So it was a sort of a fun living arrangement. There was a lot of different people. So I think that's sort of where people are leaning towards. And young professionals is an important consideration oftentimes for the economy, you know, prime working age people, getting those people into your community as well. So I know that we need to focus on families for the school sustainability and all of the things we've talked about, but I don't know if there's a desire to mention like young professionals. And by young professionals, I think that sort of captures those without children.
Right.
Yeah.
We're just looking at the second bullet, you know, again, you know, that we talked about a lot the last go around, walkability, you know, just alternative transportation. But I'm just wondering, you know, I know there's the Route 2 work, there's a lot going on there, but do you want to mention anything? Because it talks about promoting modes of alternative transportation. Do we need to mention, you know, incentivizing? Because I'm just thinking of like the high school, you know, how many people drive their kids over to the school, and obviously the university traffic, and just something to strengthen that so that you know, there's some incentive to use other transportation.
How do we
We've talked about this.
incentivize it? What would be?
I don't, that's why it's, that one was, because you talked about, that's a selling point for the university, allowing the
Right.
cars, but that's.
First year students are allowed to have cars, which is not unheard of.
That's
on
fair.
most campuses, yeah. But they enjoy that. And I personally drive to the bottom of the class. Parking
High
tickets,
school?
though.
The high school could offer lockers for kids so they didn't have to haul all their stuff, and that might reduce the need for driving. That's a separate conversation, I'm sure.
Now that's interesting. Yeah, because that would be a barrier to, if, you know, I'm
Yeah.
not lugging 6 textbooks around.
It's true. My son had 4 backpacks today to go to school and
Oh.
practice and school and after school and all the things, so. It's very
Eric, I'm
true.
gonna put you right on the spot. You walk in the door and you gotta get to work, but we're just looking at the mission statement. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, the bulleted points. But I was just asking a question that talks about investing in transformative transportation. We've talked about the Route 2 corridor and then, you know, bikeable, walkable, but in all of your work, do you know of any incentives? How you can incentivize people using other forms of transportation? I was wondering whether we'd somehow strengthen the language in that bullet point from our mission statement. And this is what,
Really, the best way to incentivize it is to make it inviting.
Yeah.
It's spending money on the infrastructure
okay,
in a way that really makes it feel safe for people to use.
yeah,
Not just for someone like me who rides all the time, but
Yeah.
for someone who doesn't ride ever. To go and use that bike lane, bike path, crosswalk, sidewalk, whatever it is, and feel really comfortable. There's a whole bunch of parts though regarding that. It's not just like, yes, this is separated, but it's got nice aesthetics, it's got nice environment. It feels like more like a park, not like an industrial
yeah,
place for a pedestrian to walk. And I think there's a lot of aspects, but that's the best way to incentivize it. Make it feel safe.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that particular bullet, look at number
That's what I was gonna look at.
2. And I don't know if you've had it or would have anything to add to that, given your expertise.
Isabel, is it targeted investment rather than incentivizing?
Well, I like the term incentivizing, and I think I was leaning towards more what Eric said as well, that it really is that targeted investment piece. Although sometimes, you know, in much larger cities, and I'll be open about that, people do provide, you know, public like bus passes to their employees. Employers will provide things. Large apartment complexes will provide bus passes to their people as part of like a requirement from the planning board in some cases, depending on how big the
So
apartment
we
is.
do that.
Yeah,
We have a bus that's free,
Yeah,
that goes around. So there is an incentive, that's already happening. And the big, the apartment complexes, as we got going, the last one was required to either have a bus or buy into the bus system, and one of the other ones does already. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the bus and a smaller piece of that, not the greatest hours, and everybody will tell you they want more, but there is an incentive, a free bus that goes around town during working hours.
Pay them to ride the bus.
Exactly.
Is that an incentive?
so I know that you're sort of
Carrot and a stick.
Yeah.
I know that you're sort of joking, but I will say, so my friend works in Boston for Google, so different context, but they do pay them a stipend if they don't utilize their parking garage. So Google pays for the parking garage, but then they'll pay the employees a stipend if they choose a different mode of transportation, so.
get Tyler Tech on board, come on now.
Well, I will add one more thing to this. And I just realized how late it was. I was going by the clock on my stove. So I realized it was unplugged earlier and I was gonna be right here at 6 o'clock. And I realized I'm quite a bit late. The one thing in that bullet, that the one part of the language, and I think the vision of using off-road is to instill that this is separated from regular road traffic. But what I feel like could happen is that someone's gonna read off-road and think mountain bike, recreation.
Yeah.
Like, why put resources into that? And so either we ought to clarify or call it like separated bicycle paths or multi-use, maybe we can use that language, and that would sort of encompass bicycles, people rolling, people walking. But yeah, off-road does get used in that context a lot, but not always, so it can be misconstrued as something that's feels more like a play.
Yeah, I thought of that when I read this, but when wife and I went over to Austria and Germany, but it was just astounding at the number of off-road separated bike lanes and the infrastructure that they had there.
Yeah,
So,
they're-
and
they're
that's
also called-
inviting, yeah.
Yeah, they're called protected lanes very
Yeah.
often, separated. Off-road is also a term that's used. And I think the goal there is like, how can we connect like all these dead end roads with a multi-use path that can be used for transporting people to school and to work?
What would you suggest for terminology that might be a little bit more appropriate?
If we're really gonna like try to like explain to people in the future, so when they read this, they understand right away. The additional multi-use ways that are separated from public road systems, something like that. I mean, really just spell it out, I guess is how I would do it. And that way it's very clear.
Would those trails paths be cleared in the wintertime? Like,
Well, they'd have to be created in a way, like the town's slowly been creating these little connections.
Yeah.
They're like sidewalks, but they go through the woods and
Yeah.
got people's houses and they're paved. And once they're paved, then they can be maintained throughout the year.
That was the intent of Black Bear
Heights.
Heights over there, because that was part of that whole scheme, was to have a paved path, just like you said, at the end of all those cul-de-sacs and get to the school. It was gonna have lights, little light posts, the whole bit, so,
And that's still a reality that could happen.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Do you want to take another crack at that then?
Yeah, multi-use ways multi-use ways, I think is probably the best way to put it, separated by public road systems to incentivize, something along those lines.
Take another crack at it.
Yep.
Other comments?
Nothing in the first paragraph. I guess what I pictured is this is gonna go somewhere where somebody is going to read it.
Yeah.
Like they may be interested in coming to Orono. So if I was asked a question back in that last sentence where it says Orono is culturally rich haven that brings people together, both diverse cultural events and abundant economic opportunities. And they looked at me and said, what's the abundant economic opportunity? What's my answer gonna be?
Tyler Technologies.
So what I.
That's a beginning, but I don't. This has an S on it, there's opportunities.
We want all the good,
Opportunities.
bring all the good ones to us.
What I would encourage you to think of is, rather than this being something that describes how we are now, think of this as something that describes how we are really in about 15, 20 years, our sort of long-term vision that we're hoping to be in at the end of this plan, rather than the beginning.
So are we charged with just laying this out, or are we charged with how suggesting ways that this can happen?
So right now we're laying it out, although I'm open to your suggestions. I think we have the time, because that will sort of be my next step, is to put those suggestions together.
I mean, because a lot of this should go down through here. I mean, yeah, this is a nice place, but who's charged with
Make that happen.
making this place like this?
That'll be sort of our next work. This is the
Oh,
initial
okay.
phase, but I have to come back to you guys with the actual goals, objectives, and action steps to get us here. And then hoping to incorporate feedback from you all as well.
I mean, but understanding how we get there, feed into this language, right?
Mhm.
To some degree. Like if you had specific economic opportunities that you're thinking about, like, oh, that could be a huge thing for us.
Mhm.
Kind of like the farm thing, or food processing that never really happened.
Yeah.
I think we even had language in there maybe about that, like
Yeah, it was a.
If there's some
food
huge
hub,
opportunity, yeah.
Laura, do you have any comments on the mission statement?
Not right now. I'm gonna be there in a few minutes. So, sorry, thanks.
Have you gone through all the bullets or did I step in just?
We're just,
We're sort of
I
jumping.
had a couple comments, Dennis weighed in.
I feel like
What do you have? Yeah.
the feet on the street doesn't, I don't know what that means. It'd be nice to like. Well, that's the third bullet, I think. And will enhance feet on the street in and around Orono's downtown. Maybe we should, maybe that's an opportunity to spell it out too, like what exactly do we want to see in the future here?
So,
Like vibrant downtown, I think is what we're going for in that statement, right?
I think it's more than that. So it is a vibrant downtown, but it's a vibrant downtown because people are living and working in the downtown, walking between destinations. So the feet on the street is sort of trying to encompass all of that.
I liked feet on the street. That was catchy.
I could be the one that's out of the loop with that catchphrase, I guess.
I also really do like that you made this so positive. It's far more positive than the other one. I appreciate that.
I think to address it, because I think you're right. I'm using like planner terminology, so I can put in a parenthesis, more people living and working in and around downtown.
Right.
The missing middle caught my attention too. There was the two quotations that I caught too. And most people would know what that.
But Isabel, there is the merit to, some people do like to live and walk to work and walk to dinner.
Right.
And walk home. I don't know any of them, but you might want.
Right here.
I mean, that's, I mean, that's, and I think that's, but what's tricky with, and what's tricky with feet on the street. Is that's me? Am I a feet on the street? And I
Yes,
think
you
that's
are.
just, I am,
Yes, you
but I mean,
are.
I think it's that whole, a vibrant, walkable, you know.
That was a really big deal for us. I mean, we live over on Webster, right across the street from Eric. And I didn't give you a ride today, but oh well.
I didn't give you one either.
But we.
I have a tandem.
With schools close by, it was really important to us. My wife walked our kids to school every single day through two kids to, until they started riding bikes and then they were done with us. But yeah, that was really important to us. It's another handy. So we were some of those, me less so.
But I think it applies to all generations because
Yeah.
the young people want to be able to walk to the schools and have that. I mean, the kids, it's beautiful here. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You come around here around 2:30, 3 o'clock and the kids are leaving school everywhere,
Well, they call it,
walking and driving. It's not just, but I mean, it's,
they call it free range.
Yeah.
I mean, the kids do.
Yeah.
Kids say we're free range and that's unheard of
but
anymore.
for seniors and aging population, the ability to just walk around and not have to jump in a car and drive. And I mean, the reality is by the time you drive and park and walk, it's
There's
quicker
a,
and easier to just go right where you want to go from door to door, but yeah.
there's a word for this and I can't think of it right off the top of my head right now, but it has to do with like this, like, I know it's a big thing in like Europe, for instance, like when they have a parcel and the code is developed in such a way that that parcel of land, which encompasses like several blocks of a town or city, must include places for residences and commerce. And I don't know, maybe that's the type of language, it's out there.
Yeah, we talked about that at the downtown meeting a little bit. The 15-minute city is, I think, what you're
Yes.
looking for.
Okay.
Or 15-minute community. And if you recall, we did talk about that a little bit at the downtown economy conversation where that was really what we were discussing, was making sure that people who, especially if you choose to live and work or live in the downtown, that you can at minimum bike, which would be like a 3/4 of a mile bike ride for those of us not fast at biking like me, or like it would be about, it's a 3/4 of a mile walk and a 3-mile bike, I think, in fact. So a little bit faster. Yeah.
That would be cool to mention about the downtown, if people think that's the way, not cool in a, but in a, That defines it. If you mean feet on the street, that would, you know, the downtown, if you could have that, since your downtown was that.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah, I
you're
remember-
talking everything here, Webster, I mean, you're talking everything.
I remember Evan presented that. Remember there was, I thought it was like 2,000 feet or something like that. I just drew a
Circle.
circle around, you know, around the downtown to see what people, what was supposedly reasonable to walk or bike.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Because the thought process is that if you're within sort of 15-minute walk, you might choose to. I make the joke, like, when I was next to a Hannaford, it was embarrassing if I got in my car to go to that Hannaford. Like, we were so close. Okay, you live close enough to walk. So sort of that, giving that.
Yeah, sorry, I just got to a place where I could chime in on the vision. And I just wondered if, I did notice there's like, we're a culturally rich haven and then diverse cultural events, whether it's like, you don't need to say diverse cultural events. You could just say diverse events because you've said we're culturally rich. And then I didn't know, the vibrancy and like the thriving piece would be awesome to like be like at the forefront, but I don't care. Like, we don't need to get caught up in this. The positivity is coming through, which I appreciate as well. So those were my comments. Thank you.
Thanks.
Does she need to flip the paragraphs? The first two paragraphs, is that what?
Yes, that's what I was referring to.
So did you say flip them?
Yeah, so put
Yeah.
the second
Yeah,
one
yeah.
first one second. I mean, it would work either way, but.
Yeah, I showed this to my wife before I came over, and he wondered that whether you know, again, it seemed like you just jump into that statement and wasn't sure that that's how you want to start a vision statement, which kind of agrees with what we're saying. Another opinion.
Second too. Yeah. It makes it even.
Other comments on this? Want to just take another crack at it and bring it back? I know you want direction coming out of this meeting so you can kind of finalize this, but we're gonna need to, I think, see another draft.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I understand what you're hoping to get out of it, so.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've, oh, you probably can't because you're right under the TV, but I've been making the changes as we
Okay.
discussed.
Oh, nice.
Unless there's like a major change, like wanting to add something that I would like, is really the only thing that I don't think we have it here. So and I think that's what Laura was getting at, was maybe adding a little bit more language around being a vibrant community.
Mhm.
But everything else I think I've got.
Okay. good.
I have a couple other comments, unless I'm butting into an agenda that's loaded, it seems okay. So, yeah, this is the fourth bullet, focusing on quality of life improvements.
Mhm.
And you say expanding access to recreational and cultural amenities, but the recreational, I feel like could be, I think that can be kind of drawn out a little bit more. And cultural amenity, because it feels like you're talking about access to recreational activities, which in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is like trails, boat launches, etc. But then you kind of conclude that whole thought by talking about things that are more like, or group activities like festivals, and plenty of things to do in Orono. I don't, that one statement I don't like. Plenty of things to do. It sounds, you know, what are plenty of things to do?
Is that the one you moved?
They already took that, yeah.
Oh, did you already comment on this one?
Well, no, I
No.
support, but wasn't that the one that we moved the
No, that
recreational?
was the one down below.
So this one was, sorry to interrupt, I don't know. this one was specifically to really get at what people were saying at the last meeting, which was around making sure that when you come into downtown, it feels like there are things to do was actually the terminology used. So, you know, that there are events going on the weekends, that there are things that you can take like an out of town or two, was sort of what the conversation was, if I recall.
Be something to do for everybody.
Yeah, and then to the point that they were making, we had discussed on the next bullet. At first, I had, we will ensure that important outdoor recreational areas so defined are protected for future generations. Maybe what I think you're getting at is revising this bullet, but also adding a bullet around access to recreational amenities, like access to water bodies, access to boat launches.
And that's sort of tied into the last comment, but the last comment seems a bullet, seems very focused on conservation, not necessarily outdoor recreation. They're tied together, of course, but conservation can strictly occur without recreation happening at all.
We chatted about that just before you got
Okay.
here, because it seemed like there was some redundancies. And so the recreation was gonna come out of, because as you said, focus more on the natural resource end of it for that last bullet and capture recreation. So maybe to your point, a separate bullet about recreation or access, is that?
Yeah, maybe you want to combine that with the fourth bullet that's talking about
Yeah.
things to do. But things to do, I mean, one of the things that gets me is like people at home are like, there's nothing to do. And yet we have beautiful parks and trails and rivers, and those aren't necessarily advertised as things to do, but they're access to ways of enjoying your life. Whereas something that's advertised like the Orono Bog Walk, which is in Orono, is a great thing that you would take your out of town visitors to go check out. So I think that fourth bullet can just be, yes, I think what we want is things going on on campus, like at the Collins Center, we have the
I was
Orono
just
Bog
gonna say
Walk, but we also have
exactly
like
that.
access to natural environments for recreation and forest bathing or whatever. A lot that can happen without necessarily like quote things that are organized by the town or other groups in the town.
I'm so sorry, I have to go to work, but just to add on to what Eric said, if we could add a little something about the university and that particular one, because given all the cultural events and all the recreation usage that happens on campus in the forest and the rec center and so.
Museums are there.
Exactly. I
There's
mean,
quite a lot.
I would love to see. I appreciate that you put it in the end bullet, but it would be nice. I think it fits well in that one as well. If we can kind of just show that partnership a little bit more. I think that might fit well in there. And so sorry, I have to.
Isabel, as you're working it, if you ended it, what he said, that very, very last thing is if you ended it at, not ended, but if you ended it with the, just before and plenty of things to do, and just ended it festivals and events, but then put like, it's almost go like with a phrase or a semicolon, a vibrant and energized community for all people and all interests and all ages. You could really get into that whole, that it's a, you know, you keep talking about bringing back that vibrant and energized community. That's, and don't say diversity this time. Define diversity. All people, all ages, all interests. You really kind of slip in what diversity means, that it's everybody. And I don't know if that's the way, because we use diversity well and a lot, that's the way to say it. And then it brings back that energized and vibrancy that brought up by 2 or 3 people. And you could end it right there, and it's almost like those are like sub bullets of each other or whatever, but yeah, just kind of a.
And if we wanted to have things to do or something like that, we could say plenty of points of interest or something along the lines of that, which would be museums and trailheads and et cetera.
Activities. Yeah. Without question, university, they're expanding what they're offering. Yeah, and we gotta leverage it.
Yeah, I agree.
So what I did, if you can't see it, was I separated these two bullets. I said, we'll focus on quality of life improvements such as enhancing or expanding access to natural environments for recreation. Because I do think that gets at a lot of what we heard at the survey too, that access needs to be a little bit more enhanced. And then also that we will be a vibrant and energized community through the promotion of cultural amenities, including working with partners such as the university to create festivals, events, and plenty of points of interest to explore in Orono for all age groups. It's a little wordy, but.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like, we got it.
It's like you hit submit
Yeah,
in
yeah,
college. I'm done.
yeah. I've reread it 100, yeah, good enough.
Now you would have AI review it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric, does that capture what you were thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, this is true, like, we can keep wordsmithing this.
Yeah.
But
All night long, we can keep doing this thing.
I think making sure people actually look at it in the future is probably more important than our wordsmithing right now.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if it's a priority, and it is from our survey, that it's captured there separately. So I think that does it.
Next, we were jumping on goals and
Yep.
objectives again.
Yep, that would be great. So we're just sort of continuing going through the goals and objectives specifically from the last meeting. So Catherine at the last meeting had suggested we just focus on goals and objectives. And I want to note that I am focusing on this and sort of hammering it because it really helps me as I go on to the next phase to kind of get a temperature check from the committee around what I might be able to expand upon and maybe provide some new or enhanced actions on, and what may no longer be as big of a priority. So I think just going through as we did before and having conversations is the most helpful thing for me to hear. So where we had left off was on natural, scenic, and historic resources. We had talked a little bit about the goal related to this. And if you give me 1 second, I can tell you. Oh,
20, is it 20? And university expertise.
There's
I am
economy, and then it switches to natural, scenic, and historic.
Yeah, I'm actually on page 20, it's 25 of our previous packet. Actually, sorry, I'm on page 26 of our previous packet. It's at the bottom. So the objective was the town will be prepared to adapt to changes in climate that affect public infrastructure.
Got it, yeah. Okay.
And I just want to flag as well that Gail isn't here, but she had sent me an email because she knew she'd be missing. So this one is something that she wanted to have a little bit more conversation about. So one of her things that she wants the town to be a little bit more cognizant of is actually promoting sustainability at the municipal level. So I think she had actually brought this up at the last meeting too, you know, having solar panels that run all operations of the town, making sure that the town itself is promoting sustainability as sort of the leader in the community. I think that this starts to get at that. It is a little bit more about stormwater flows, right sizing culverts, roadway infrastructure, but I think that this objective captures that as well. So anyway, just looking for some feedback and conversation about whether this is still a priority or if we should rework this objective.
Not controlling stormwater standards.
No, we
Just
follow,
follow.
we follow the state standards more or less. Yeah.
But this is they were gonna work with town engineer, public works and experts in University of Maine to evaluate the impact. We're not doing that.
Well, yes, so to your point, we are continuing to follow the state guidance on requiring calculations for certain storm events. the town can actually be more strict than the state. The state is sort of the baseline level for what we have to follow, but municipalities can be more strict.
Yes.
Right, we can make up whatever we want.
Yeah,
But my point is that this was 10 years ago, whatever it was, we haven't done that.
no,
I don't suspect that we have the resources or the ability to do that, but this seems like,
Well, the state is in the process of redoing all their stormwater regulations as we speak.
right, so we're
And
gonna,
there's engineers, public works guys, regulators. I've been on that committee for a long time now, and that'll be a good model for municipalities to follow, so it should be sufficient.
right, so we should axe that one essentially, right? Saying we're not
I
gonna.
mean, we want to, the one thing we want to protect Johnny MacBrook and other resources, so we can highlight the importance of that, but developing our own standards for stormwater, I think there'll be a need for that. And if we rely on what the state's doing, that should be sufficient.
I mean, the second one kind of feeds into Johnny MacBrook a bit more.
Yeah.
Like almost right. 6A was the one I was saying, that just seems.
Yeah.
Too ambitious. 6B is culverts and drainage design. And looking at our culverts and drains and.
and then the floodplains one, I just want to note that with regard to this objective, I think on some level, the objective itself is still relevant because we talked a little bit about the floodplains issue and FEMA's flood maps being based on historical data as part of our initial conversation around natural resources. This is still a documented issue. FEMA hasn't changed how they approach this. It was interesting for me to see that this was something that the previous comp plan recommended, and it has not been completed at the local level. I think we were going to focus a little bit more on goals and objectives. So to me, it seems like this one is probably still relevant.
I mean, the challenge is, are we saying we would define our own floodplains that would not agree with FEMA? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think that the suggestion from the previous comp plan was, yes, so base it on changing precipitation patterns and be more strict than FEMA.
And so we would hire an engineering group to do that work and.
Well, the same thing that the regulations that the state is updating is based on all of the latest data. So they applied a correction factor to the current data set, but then they're gonna jump to the next best thing when it comes out, and that just hasn't happened yet. So again, if we rely on what the state's doing, it's so much better than what we have now. So if we default to that,
Okay.
it should be sufficient.
But is the state gonna alter the federal floodplain maps? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I wouldn't say they're gonna do that. Eventually FEMA will, I mean, they'd have to update their flood maps every now and then. But I'm just talking about rainfall and stormwater management and all of that stuff.
Right,
So what I'm hearing is that this objective is probably no longer as relevant to Orono as long as we follow state guidelines and the model ordinance is coming out of the state.
Right, so if you, make it generic that if you just follow the current state regulations. That's for stormwater management and modeling, rainfall data, all of that stuff.
That's your type thought.
So I'm looking at 3.7 now, which is Caribou Bog as mapped by the
Just
main
about.
map. Sorry.
Before you jump, there's one key fact of things you've done
Mhm.
that are gonna change what that goal is. You now have an environmental services coordinator, manager, full-time, that oversees stormwater, climate, invasive species, you name it. And that is a major step forward to climate, meeting the goals of the Penobscot climate and world climate change issues. I mean, I've had multiple comments in the year I've been here because of the work that was done in Webster Park to remove the invasive species in there, and that's a big part of doing it. So I think as it says town engineer, public works, and the newly created environmental services manager as a full-time position within the town staff, that should be somehow shown as that commitment we made to maintaining.
Perfect. With Caribou Bog, this next objective 3.7, this was before all three domes of the bog were conserved by the Orono Land Trust. So I would think that this is no longer a relevant goal only because it's been accomplished.
Agreed.
Ooh, that's a yippee moment.
Yeah.
So 3.8 is the town will assure blocks of open lands scaled to different settings that support a variety of wildlife that would preserve natural plant communities. And it talked about maintaining the FNA standards and maintaining existing conservation areas, and again, prohibiting invasive species and addressing them when they come up through education. I'm thinking that while this is probably going to be a similar goal mirrored in our next plan because it comes from the state, but I would think that it's not going to be a priority objective anymore because frankly, as we discussed at the last meeting, some of the FNA standards might need to be relooked at to accomplish some of our other goals. In town lands, they are conserved. The areas that are conserved, I think, are already conserved by Orono Land Trust. And we have our environmental services manager working on the invasive species issues. So I'm thinking this is no longer relevant, but maybe there's something here that I'm missing.
I don't know, this is a little bit out of my knowledge of things that I'm comfortable talking about, but we could probably at least shorten.
Mhm.
We don't have to have this whole addendum listed in there, and this all happened so long ago that it's probably not necessary to mention it at least.
Mhm. Bill, I might put you on the spot for a second, or Judd. Was this around ensuring like wildlife habitats and wildlife corridors? What do you know what this was in reference to, or why this was a priority of the last plan?
Go back a little bit, just tell me specifically what you're referring to.
So I'm on 3.8, which is the objective just as worded. The town will assure blocks of open lands scaled to different settings that support a variety of wildlife that would preserve natural plant communities.
Mm,
And it kind of talks about like in town lands, so maintaining the existing preserves.
Yeah,
This is not, yeah, I don't even know if we need. Most of this is just saying we're gonna keep kind of doing what we've done,
Yeah,
and it doesn't. At least the first two don't feel meaningless to me.
okay.
And then I don't know, you say prohibit the use of invasive species. I can't imagine, I know on the planning board, at least everything comes through. Nothing's gonna have anything invasive there.
Yeah.
And on someone's own property, I don't know if you could stop them from planting something. So I don't know how useful that one is necessarily.
I'm hearing that this probably isn't a priority, if only because it's things that are already being accomplished.
Yeah,
And so I think should probably remove, if not, reword, if not just remove entirely, because it's sort of being,
just don't want any backsliding.
right.
And any one of these, so the Caribou Bog stuff, that Caribou Bog's pretty big. The land trust has conserved some of it, but a pretty big area, so.
I mean, the way that you kind of preserve open blocks of land is you make it easier to have higher density housing where you don't have that.
Right,
And that's not even listed here.
right.
So. No.
I think we could reword this to be more relevant to what we're hoping to accomplish in the future, rather than looking back on what we were just trying to maintain at the time.
Right.
Does that make
Housing
sense?
stock, yep.
Bill, does this relate to last comp plan committee meeting where multiple board members talked about the lot size standards? So even though we don't want to promote or the loss of land, I thought there was conversations that I don't even know the word, but you have very large requirements in that F&A.
Yeah.
And the cluster development's good, but I think there was
Yeah,
somebody
Dennis
sitting next to
had
you that maybe mentioned that it's not cost effective and that's preventing some of the growth that we could have seen. And so I don't think it's losing it, because we obviously want to keep the land trust land and
I'm not
I
sure
bet
that it
it's worth
prevented
it.
that, because I couldn't hear that well from my hotel room where I was stranded
yeah,
at the last meeting, but
that's right.
I still- you know, I just wanted, we haven't had development of any sort. So whether it's in the F&A zone or in town, we haven't had any subdivisions in the last 10 years other than, you know, the fellow down on,
The grant.
yeah, that they just like chopped up lots along the road. So I'm not sure that our policies dissuaded people from coming here. I think there's a bigger picture, Dennis, and I remember asking you last time, what's it gonna take for people to come here and do infill development? Development out in the rural areas. What's it gonna take to change that? I think lot sizes can be tweaked if that didn't work. Remember, I think we were kind of following Evan's lead the last time.
I mean, lot
He had
sizes-
seen everything, so he proposed lot sizes and we went with that, but if that's not feasible, then we've got to adjust that.
Yeah, well, see, presently it's close to 4 acres
Yeah,
per house
Yeah.
lot up there. That
Yeah.
is. I don't see the reasoning for it, but
I know the discussion was preserving that natural character in our F&A zone. Just
I mean,
larger lot sizes, if you want to do subdivision, your lots are gonna be large. If you want the housing density bonus, then you cluster and you could do your subdivision out there. We're
there's no
trying to-
bonus in the cluster. Where's the bonus in the cluster?
Particularly if the open land is up on site with the cluster. That's
Yeah,
not.
you've got, so as a developer, you've got to give up 30 to 40% of your land, leaving green space. So where is that benefited? I mean, to me, a good example of that's been in place, right? When was it used?
It's been a long time. I mean,
Where?
there's a gain per bedroom, but it's not adequate. I think what you wanna do is you wanna actually draw like a mile radius around downtown and allow that to get dense. Like,
Really small
I don't know if I
lots.
wanna talk specifics, but like you buy a piece of land that's half a mile from our downtown, you can put townhomes in there, right? Like, we don't let any of that happen. Where instead of us building like half acre lots or quarter acre lots, it's like, all right, I can get 4 $300,000 homes on this quarter acre lot. And I can get another 4 on this quarter acre lot. So I buy 5 acres and I can put in, 25 units at $350 a pop or 300 a pop. So that's like entry level family housing. Maybe my numbers aren't exactly right, but that's something that you probably get someone interested in.
Mhm.
I'd be interested in it. I don't know if anyone else would be, but
Yeah.
like that's the kind of development that's gonna, I think, drive some people here. I don't know what you think, Dennis, being,
Well, I mean, I don't, are you talking about cluster development? I mean,
No, I'm
it's not gonna work.
like, have you been to other cities where they have townhomes?
Yes,
And that's what I'm talking about, like townhome, you can't build a single family home structure today that's like 1,500, 2,000 square feet for less than like 400, 500 grand. Can't do it. And that's not all the infrastructure and the land, that's just the structure. So the only way you're gonna build these kind of entry level, mid-level housing structures are if they're connected. They're townhomes. They are not a structure on a quarter acre. or half acre. They're 4 structures on a quarter acre that share walls. And they're 1,600 square feet, 1,800 square feet, and they're built on a quarter acre. So on 5 acres, you can get, 20 homes. Right? 20 homes at a quarter million apiece, that's $4 million. That kind of math works.
The issue is our current density requirements for in town or about a mile outside of town. So like our current medium density residential wouldn't allow.
Way too high. That's my point.
Yeah, the
Exactly.
minimum
My point is
density, yeah.
and no one's, you buy a quarter of an acre within the town of Orono and build a 2,000 square foot home, I need 600 grand. Right? Like that's kind of the math, like, and it just is not gonna work with our current ordinance. The only way you change it is you change that ordinance to allow that kind of high density building, which people might not want, right? Now all of a sudden you've got a single family home street abutting, 50 townhomes. So it's 10 homes on a street and then it abuts this street with 50 townhomes or.
But I think part of the image that you're portraying when you talk about townhomes is like there are other designs for that type of development that are like, feels like you've created a new little neighborhood,
Well, you
like
can
whether
make
it's
it
like a
simple,
cottage.
yes.
Or
Yeah, I don't mean,
yeah.
like, right, like I.
So I think, but there's nothing in our zoning at all that encourages that type of development. So what do we need to fix? Scratch the zoning. Start over because it does not encourage development that's feasible for people right now.
Well, and then even on some level, if I could just add on to that, I think like you are saying, okay, what if there's a street with 10 homes on it? Well, you couldn't even build a lot of the historical development patterns that we already have in Orono. So Webster side, a lot of the parcels over there only have 60 feet of frontage. Doesn't meet our minimum frontage requirements for MDR. They only have, 6,000 square feet of lot area. Doesn't meet the 15,000 square feet of minimum lot that you're required to have for if you were creating that lot new today, right? So I think if we look at our current parcel maps and we understand the historic development patterns of Webster side, of Sailor development and surrounding properties, I think we would be surprised that it doesn't necessarily match up with what we require today.
Yeah, there's not many are not conforming lots.
Right.
But we would need to my point is, if we really want to do this with housing, we have to change the economics, which means a radical change in our ordinance.
Yeah.
A radical change in the density we allow,
Yeah.
which is getting to what you want. And you can make it, in the ordinance, you can define, hey, you can't just slap together things. These structures have to be however you want to do it. Of course, knowing every time, the more you add, the more expensive it gets, right? Every requirement, everything you add is more. But our current ordinance just doesn't support anything. No one's going to build here.
How do you preserve rural character and then achieve the goals that you want? And that what we talked about last meeting.
I would do it within like a mile radius of downtown to start. I wouldn't.
Right, but last time there were comments, you and others made, it's like, well, we, clearly, ordinances failed because we just didn't have any development in the outskirts of town and we didn't have anything anywhere. But I'm wondering, how do we preserve rural character and get people, if they want to live in the outskirts, have at it, just meet our standards? I just don't understand how that's gonna work.
I guess I don't understand where we're trying to preserve rural character.
Yeah.
Because currently, even in town, it's not working. And so, I don't know, maybe at the intersection of Forest Ave and Essex, we want to preserve rural character, but there's so much of Orono that I don't know that the goal is to preserve rural or that it is even rural.
Yeah, I just remember Evan's presentations, and that was a big discussion about the F&A zone, is that, yeah, we want to allow development out there, but then came up with those standards and people nodded their head. If it's not working, by all means, let's tweak that.
I don't think we want to promote high density, townhomes or complexes out in F&A.
Yeah.
My point is you want to promote it in closer to town. So people can walk, kids can walk to school.
That meets a lot of our goals, but at the same time, I think you had made a comment last time about also having that flexibility. If people want to live outside, we've got to make sure that they're covered as well. Wasn't that something?
Well, and I think there should be a reasonable way to put a subdivision in off of Forest Ave, where Maxwell Drive or Grant Drive is, that's actually makes financial sense.
Yeah.
Because that's not the case now either.
Okay.
And to me, that feels like kind of rural living, but it's not feasible.
I don't think it's not economically feasible today, period. To rebuild those houses today with all that development would be 800 grand a house or something. It would be,
Well,
it would be
totally.
crazy.
But again, that's where you start to think about people now might choose to have a house that's pretty big, but on a lot that's maybe postage stamp compared to
Higher
what
density out
is
there.
currently there. Yeah, but as long as like you have access, I mean, there's so much access to trails and open space out there. You could build 5 houses on an acre and it would still be rural. Like,
Yeah,
and that would be more feasible. I don't know, but like right now, what we're offering is not conducive to any kind of investment.
5 houses an acre, you gotta remember, that has to have well and septic out there.
Right, so it might, I'm just saying, like, there are other ways to manage things
yeah, yeah.
than, because the current is not working.
Yeah, I never really, I'm not a developer, I didn't really understand some of the costs that you're mentioning. That
And
it's
house, to
completely
build a
prohibitive.
house now is probably two to 300 a square foot.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're not building
It's more,
anything.
yeah, it's
It's
three
like,
plus.
the last one on a multi-units, I was go to 350 a square foot for like a multi-unit apartment complex. So it is, to build a 3,000 square foot home, just the structure, you're talking 400 to 600 grand. And that's nothing, that's no driveway, that's no well, that's no septic, that's no cleared lot, that's no road to the place. It's, the economics of those developments is just, it doesn't exist today. I think if we're trying to get starter families, right? If that's the intent, is entry-level housing or mid-level housing. That is a really hard thing, even if they're 1 acre lots or half acre lots. The economics of it are very difficult.
But it's trying to make it affordable for a professor and like a spouse even.
Yeah, maybe you can, maybe they can afford a 500, $600,000 home.
But from an economic development standpoint, have people even been knocking on the door to ask about opportunities to build? Well, I know Black Bear Heights has been a focus for a while. We've been trying to get people, but do developers come in and ask, I mean, how can we do something in the outskirts of town? Has there been any discussions? I wasn't aware that was.
People inquire. I mean, I think the outskirts, I mean, you're right. I mean, we had a pretty tough economic go, but I think I had made this comment, maybe it was Jeff Gordon. When I first got here 10 years ago, when I was doing Parks and Rec, we had a conversation about adding something. And he said, well, gee, that would only, if we got 2 houses, that would pay for this. And I said, and I think I'd been here 3 years. And I said, Jeff, there haven't been 2 houses built here in 3 years, let alone. So people weren't building houses. And I think part of the subdivision issue where there were subdivisions available out there that had lots available that no one was building in. So people weren't saying, hey, let's put another subdivision in because that should work. Look at these other ones are working so well right now. So I think that I don't think we got a lot of traction, but I think recently with the housing, a lot of people asking about housing and those questions are coming up and the need, we are getting more questions about things, but I think the question of feasibility is what's coming up.
And the challenge we right?
I just wonder, I mean, you came from Herman, and I think Herman and
I don't want to do Herman
Hamden.
here. I want that on the record. Herman won't work here.
Yeah, well, I just wonder, what do Herman and Hamden do? Because they're reasonable comps.
I think you said this, so 2 things. One, rural, you asked, what's the rural character? What are we preserving? What is the rural character? From manager perspective, your rural character is, do we have any plan in the next 3 to 5 decades to bring water and sewer anywhere near where we're talking about? No.
No.
So when you look at you have the land trust land that creates a very natural, beautiful opportunity. Because it separates a large portion of your developable land in town, high density, maybe even near the interstate, high density from your outskirts. Which if you were most developers aren't gonna do 1 acre house lots even. But if you told them they could do 1 1/4 as a minimum, they're gonna pop up like crazy. My gut tells me, because there's land out there, they do it. And there's a few little nuances, but you wanna make it rural residential. Which means, for me, a county kid that doesn't wanna live in the county anymore because it's struggling, I want a lawn. I wanna mow it. I want my kid to be able to kick a soccer ball. I hear this all the time, and you look at the communities that have developed fast. These are nice family homes, 3 to 4, maybe sometimes 5 bedrooms. you know, 2-3 car garages. They're all driving, they got a nice lawn, the kids in the neighborhood can walk to each other's house, feel somewhat safe and play games. And you might wanna keep some of the cluster development ideas of saying, you know, for every 10 house properties you do, set aside one lot that is open space, that creates that vibe within that community. To me, that's kind of, whereas you went the other route, and I'm gonna be very blunt, with cluster development, you're putting people really close together and leaving a lot of land out around them. Well, where's my lawnmower? I wanna go mow my lawn, and I want my kids to feel like they can play, and if they're fighting with Billy or fighting with Jimmy, you know, and now we can't play with each other, you're going to that same, you gotta give that a little bit, we're Mainers, we want some of our independence.
So
You know,
you
and I
like,
think-
you're seeing 1/4 acre lots? in
One and a
rural?
quarter out in the
Oh,
rural,
1 1/4.
in town, smaller the better. It's what your downtown is. I mean, what's rural character of downtown Orono? I mean, rural character is a downtown community, quintessential New England downtown is what and what does that mean? Let's go out on the coast. It's some sort of townhouse. It's some sort of, and again, not townhouse is what you think, but a brownstone, if you will, if you want to compare it to a big city environment, a bunch of houses really close together. Let them get creative. Make the house lots. I mean, the fact that some of your ordinances, you've got more non-conforming lots. I don't say you're the most, but you have a large percentage of non-conforming lots and zoning you created. Why would you create zones in a neighborhood that's almost completely built out to make the lot non-conforming in it? Make the zone meet what people did and what's there, because that's what you want them to sustain forever, unless it's highly problematic. But Webster's a nice neighborhood, you know, and it's gonna work.
The thing that we were always battling, that perception that you couldn't do anything in Orono, developers
Yeah.
didn't want to work here. But we never turned down anything, but if the economics don't work, then we have to find a way to get developers here.
Yeah, because to your point, and I totally get what you mean. Once something is getting to the planning board part, it's because we've had conversations on the back end for 6 to 8, 9 a year, you know, with people about how to make this feasible. To the point that you asked, Mitch, I do get some inquiries around trying to do
Yeah.
rural development, especially with the housing crunch that people know that we're in. And then when I say the minimum's 5 acres, they
The
say,
numbers don't work.
oh gosh, yeah, I can't do that. They walk away. And so you're right that yes, at the planning board level, we have a simplified process. But if you can't actually even get to that point because the economics of it don't work, then I think that's the issue. I totally agree with your system of like 1 1/4, 1.5 acre lots in the rural area. That still preserves a lot of that rural.
Mhm.
And I will say, I just finished a comp plan as a very rural community where there are still many working farms. And one of the things that we had the conversation about was, are we trying to preserve rural character, like how it looks, or are we preserving rural function, like how people are using this land? So are people actually using this for forestry? Are people actually using this because it's big enough land to hay? And that was the conversations that we started having, because we had a farmer on our comp plan committee and he said, well, I can't find people to work for me because they can't live here. So yes, it's important to me to have lands that are big enough to hay, but also I need some houses around my farm so that I can get people in to work for me. So I think that's what I would start to consider as we're working through some of the F&A stuff is you did something that I think was probably the right way to address the concerns that were happening at the time.
Mhm.
And now we're having different priorities. And so I think just sort of being willing for all of this process to sort of try new things and recognize that the zoning ordinance is a living document will be really important for what that's worth.
Yeah, just, I mean, every time I drive through Hamden, there's another subdivision.
Yeah.
So what are they doing and why don't people wanna come to Orono? To high taxes is one reason, but we're not that far away from them anymore.
And the flip side is they're running into struggles, and you're gonna hear more of this over the next decade or two.
Yeah.
Orono's in a place to slide back, but don't go that far,
Mhm.
because they've overslid. And there's some major development problems that are gonna happen in some of your high growth communities. I mean, I just looked in the past 10 years, one of those communities has had a 72% population increase in 10 years. 72%.
Yeah, no. you
Guess
can't.
what? Their schools they're busting at the seams. They don't know what to do. Their taxes are going up. And now the public, well, wait, we came here for low taxes. Well, now they're stuck with it. I think Orono's in this neat situation where if we do it calculated, small, you know, within that F&A and say 1.5-ish acres, you're gonna see some growth because those ones they're gonna start slowing down around us. And this is gonna be kind of Orono's opportunity to come in. Bangor's there. You know, I mean, Bangor's gonna have to do some serious planning in their downtown. How are they gonna grow up, maybe, quote unquote? But I think that's where we look at it, is you're that buffer. You know, in urban sprawl, you're one layer out from Bangor. So act like it, you know, get kind of rural character to a big service center community. Nice little neighborhoods, good schools, people where families want to live. But give them a variety of opportunities in town living.
That's the thing, that balance. So the infill development, all those concepts would work, but yet Laura, your comment and Meredith's comment last time, that one hit me. I was like, okay, well, we need to do a much better job trying to provide opportunities outside of town.
Yeah.
I just assumed it was just people, developers, you know, that perception that they couldn't get over, but if the numbers don't work, then that would,
It won't work on 4-acre lot.
yeah, I mean, I'm not a developer.
Well, yeah, but I mean, just.
Yeah,
I think it
You
was,
buy 100 acres.
yeah,
By the time you cut the road out
yeah, yeah,
and then divide the remainder.
yeah.
And we haven't met everybody, but I met some with Mitch, and they're interested. If we can maybe move some of these blocks and really reintroduce the infill development in a way that'll work, I think there's people that will do them. I think some of this too is that, you know, well, it's not Orono's problem, it's Maine's problem. It's not my backyard. I want these houses, but not here. I think I've had this conversation with a few of you.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to get over that because it's always gonna be in someone's backyard here.
No,
Now it's SIMBY.
the project of the way was just beautiful. I mean, the trail to the schools and it connected dead end with a cul-de-sac.
What's keeping it from somebody developing it now?
Was it still hung up on vernal pools? What? We got over that hurdle.
I don't. Because it still is this side of the interstate still has a lot of areas that could be developed. You could get water and sewer to them. And you'd solve your walking to school, that project. I mean, so there gotta be something keeping somebody from doing.
Right.
Need one win.
Yeah,
Need one nice little in-town project that is gonna bring in public comment and people won't, some will like it and some will hate it.
Well, they're putting
But when it
in,
all ends up, it does happen. It doesn't not happen, because right now you're stuck on and I've heard it 100 times, and you said it again. Blackberry didn't happen. It's okay.
yeah.
It'll come again, but let's do something else somewhere else and see what.
yeah, they're putting in 19 homes there and there was very little, there was like no pushback. I couldn't believe how little.
We're working with that developer there, but it's
Where
not
we
ready to go yet. There's some other issues that we gotta work
But
on.
it's through the planning board.
Works.
Yeah,
Also,
there-
are you talking about Union Street or are you talking about the
Don't OBCs.
one that's right by OBC?
Yeah.
The one that's, the emergency exits out OBC.
Oh, yeah.
Developers holding off right now. We've been working with them.
Yeah.
Kind of semi-public information, but trying to figure out better ways to make it work. It's a high cost build out.
The economics.
Is it gonna work? And that's,
The number of units reduced on that as a part of the negotiation though?
it's 19's what the subdivision plan was,
Yeah, it's
right?
pretty dense.
yeah, it was always
probably won't get it.
19 was what he was proposing, because it's just the top part that where the topography makes sense. But there were some other issues around, you know, a stream and some stormwater natural resource issues that might end up being more costly than anticipated.
Steeper than what's supposed to be there, but
It looks like, so you may not be able to, you can put it on paper that these are the lots, but it may be challenging to build on some of
Yeah.
them. Just the way it's
What are
but
the
that one,
lot sizes?
it's just gonna take a little bit more creativity. And this
That one
this
was
is all
about
happening, we'll help that.
18,000, if I remember, was the smallest.
The lot size requirements in that area we're talking about.
That's the minimum is 15,000 in that area. That's the MDR.
So there's a bill in the legislature to reduce it to 10,000.
And
And there's talk of it being 5,000.
in Orono, frankly, 10,000 makes more sense. In some places, even
Particularly right
5,000 makes sense. Yeah.
Our lot is
In town.
quarter acre.
Yeah.
My kids ended up fine.
That's a
Like
great
soccer in the
number.
backyard. Yours is a little bit bigger than ours, but
Yeah, ours is 2 lots that were put
yeah,
together.
yeah.
People do that. In all those communities you go out where there's some of those, they'll buy them both.
Yeah.
Go for it. Buy them both. If you, that's capitalism. You don't want a neighbor, buy the land, you know, I mean, we're never gonna prevent it. That's great. that's what people wanna do.
So how did we get this all into our discussion tonight? Is it all in there now, Isabel?
Yeah, I think, well, I put pen to paper to capture it, now, but yes, I understand sort of what you're saying, and I think it's me coming back with some of these recommendations that we've been talking about, actually showing some of these areas that the whole neighborhood is a non-conforming neighborhood with regard to minimum lot size, so maybe we should change it, and coming up with a
Yeah.
plan around addressing, I think I hear what you're saying, preserving rural character, but making it actually economically feasible as well.
Yeah, that was just an eye opener. I mean, I've heard Meredith enough and your points at the last meeting. Cause I'm not opposed to any of this. I'm just thinking about conversations we had 10 years ago and how things have changed and what we need to do. So
Yeah, and I think that's the point that I want to just like keep saying is probably 10 years from now, we'll look back and they'll be like, why did they do that?
things change.
It's change. It's a living document. We have to respond to the need of the time. Zoning shouldn't be something that we adopted in the 1970s and then never change again. So.
The one thing I think that needs to go in here though is like the slipping backwards for Orono will be a lot more people driving.
Correct.
And
That's
the
the,
congestion getting so much worse. So that's the critical part here and the best way to not allow that to happen or promote that is by really focusing on this 1 mile radius.
Yeah.
Because
And then
building more roads doesn't seem like a thing that's gonna happen.
And if you allow get some growth in the outskirts, it shouldn't impact your downtown driving quite as much because those people are going to drive to your #1 corridor in their commute. We're a commuting community. A lot of people that live here work in Bangor. They will drive to the interstate, so that's where that feet on the street, we need that not driving out so much. People that live here, work, stay, do everything. If you will, even the home-based remote workers, that's gonna be a newer, remote workers happening. And if they could remote work here, you'd never drive your car but for the weekends, which is nice city feel. But if you're out further out, if they can jump on the interstate quick, that's probably gonna be 80–90% of the people. Those are the people that are looking in these rural communities in the greater Bangor area. I wanna live a little bit outside of town. I'm gonna drive on a major corridor. There's nothing more major than an interstate. And if you can take that, and again, that would fix some of your Stillwater issues. If there's some bigger development that's accessible by your interstate without using Stillwater, you wouldn't have the traffic concerns that we hear sometimes. But again, it's a big puzzle, but you're right on.
had enough, Jared?
Yeah, that was my mom. And I need to go get her.
Thank you. See you.
I mean, we offended you.
Yeah, I know it. He's sensitive.
Yeah.
So I'm on 310, which is around high productivity aquifer areas. I am wondering if it seems like there was a desire at the time to maybe go further than what we've already done. Is this still something that's a priority? Because we have these aquifer protection areas with fairly intense groundwater protection standards. So I'm just curious about the past conversation.
Well, hasn't this one already been addressed? They did the aquifer overlay,
Yeah,
so I'm not sure that we need to
So-
focus too much on that.
remove as written. The town will encourage the protection of scenic resources. So I will tell you that this is kind of, again, going back to that rural function conversation. What some communities do is they go through this process where they designate, the 5 to 10 most important scenic view sheds. Those get some higher level of protection to preserve that rural character, but everything else is sort of allowable. And I'm wondering if this is still something that's a priority for it, especially as we're talking about growth potentially within that more rural FNA area.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall the discussions. It's 10 years ago. I think we did make progress on that. View sheds, I'm just, her question, will encourage the protection of scenic resources identified in this comp plan. And I remember there was a discussion of the Main Street corridor and some of the view sheds there. So there's a lot of emphasis on Main Street corridor and that view shed. I don't remember outside of that.
Was that because 10 years ago, there was conversation about this is when you're driving out towards Old Town, right? What,
Driving that way, I just remember a lot of discussion of view sheds associated with Main Street, and this is 10 years ago, and this wasn't a huge issue that I recall.
okay. Not a high priority, potentially.
Yeah.
And it does seem like some standards have been adopted.
Yeah, I know there was some work done on it, but
I'm on 312, which is, this one's really around historic preservation. This one really is focused on the Main Street Historic District. This was the one that I said, nobody has utilized the standards that have been adopted. I am trying to understand if the preservation of the buildings along Main Street are still something that's important to people. And if so, we should probably amend those standards to be a little bit more strict rather than optional as they are now.
yeah, because we talked about there was a whole presentation about all the different types of architecture on Main Street. There's a whole architectural map he laid out with all the different buildings up and down. And we got standards there that, that's why I think All Town had to have, well, that's outside Main Street here, but certain standards, like they had to resemble existing buildings, that kind of thing. That's why All Town, the facade is like it is.
Okay.
And then on Main Street, any structures or amendments to buildings had to match that type of character.
Well,
But if it's already been done, I don't know.
so for this Main Street Historic District,
Yeah.
the standards were adopted, but they were adopted as optional. So only if
that's
you
right.
were
Yep.
wanting to do a specific use in that building, which they allowed an office use to
Yes.
be done.
Yep.
You had to follow these optional historic design
That's right.
guidelines.
To follow optional.
So they were optional for everyone else, and if you wanted to do this one specific
Okay.
use, you had to follow the,
That's,
yes, yep. But everyone else owning property along this Main Street corridor was exempt.
Is that the case? Cause I thought the town was just like enforcing some issues.
We have some, nuisance standard issues around, like, if you have, if you haven't finished a building permit, you need to finish it within a certain amount of time. If you have, trash or it's falling apart, there might be some enforcement, but we don't have enforcement standards for these properties here in terms of the historic character of them. Yeah.
That wasn't my understanding. Some residents, but
Yeah, it's fully optional unless you're getting an office there. Yeah.
but I don't wanna lose that last point on the view shed thing. So, yeah, I'm just looking at the regulation. We did talk about Route 2 scenic resources.
Okay.
And stuff, so that's what I was referring to. I
Okay.
just hadn't read the regulation, but one thing we don't wanna lose is strengthening Orono's image as a scenic river town, again,
We
taking.
have lost it. The new emblem was made and there's no river really on it, right?
Yeah, so,
So I don't know that it's really relevant or important to people. If it's not even being practiced.
good point. But that was the point to me that, it seems like we wanna take advantage of our riverfront.
the new emblem, what do you mean?
The one that everyone was arguing about because it was like a watermark in the back, the one that says welcome to Orono.
The town sign.
Yeah,
Yes. Used to have Chief Orono and
So
right, it has like a
And now it
watermark
has
sort of thing. Yeah.
Viking or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
As with regard to the historic district, like, I wouldn't say there's much differentiation between the look and feel of any of the office ones versus the homes. There's a level of like degradation across the board. And so removal of anything that might encourage upgrades, I think, should be encouraged
I agree.
Okay.
rather than like let's stifle what can be done. at the cost of like it being too expensive to do anything.
Yeah, case in point, there was an article in the Bangor Daily about the city wanted the fellow to replace the slate roof and
For 200 grand.
yeah, rather expensive, so we had to put on his asphalt.
I think I tend to, my background is in historic preservation. I have a little bit of a bias here, but I actually do tend to agree with what you're saying. I don't see it. I don't see the standards that were adopted as actually working as they were intended to. And so I'm also not opposed to just removing it seems like there might be a perception issue too. So removing the perception issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, of the residents of the area.
It does seem worth noting, like, maybe that is a historic corridor and like we value the impression it makes. I
Yeah, because that's the gateway and that's what we talked about. Yeah, yeah.
don't know that should mean, like, I don't know. Like, I just think the upkeep of the buildings is more important than, I don't know how to phrase that.
Okay.
Well, we're talking about beautification in the section before, and then if you have people that aren't keeping their homes looking nice in the gateway that are downtown, then it doesn't really matter what sort of type of historic characters.
Because it's being lost.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
cars are parked on the front lawns, if there's
Can't do
trash
that.
here and there,
Yeah,
concrete
back in front lawn.
pillars.
That's actually one of the things you can't do.
I know you can't, but people do.
Well, we hear about it.
It's like our code enforcement can't keep up with this stuff.
Yeah, in our neighborhood, there's a lot of people.
Yeah, there's like, the public ways are always like, there's trash cans left in them.
Yeah.
Right, 3 days out of the week, so that's the kind of stuff that I think should be more important than historical character.
We're at 7:34. I'm moving on to land use a little bit. I think we've had a lot of these conversations around land use. I think to me, the biggest thing for this objective is I think that there needs to be a review of the land use ordinance and its ease of use and its simplicity. I work in this ordinance every day. I still find things that don't make sense sometimes or that aren't cross-referencing each other correctly. And so I've made the point at previous meetings that I think we need to do a whole sort of rewrite and reorganization of the ordinance. And a lot of these other objectives get to that too. Another big one that was talked about last time and that I still think is a problem that hasn't been addressed is separation of site plan review, which reviews buildings and the site versus conditional use review, which is reviewing impacts of a use. And we don't currently differentiate between those. And I think that's another big one that probably needs to be addressed. That was also recommended in the last plan. Because it's confusing for people that aren't building anything to have to submit a site plan.
Yeah.
And isn't necessary. Again, town will correct or resolve ambiguities and inconsistencies, same. Establishing a building height standard that allows for efficient development and use of space in especially these downtown. I think these kind of objectives need to be looked at as we're going through and re-looking at density requirements and some of these other requirements. Allowing a higher building height just allows for more efficient development in and around downtown.
Do you want to take a crack at proposed objectives for us if we're going to scrap a lot of these or rewrite them?
Yeah.
That'll simplify that task.
This one around amending the land use ordinance to increase opportunities for affordable home ownership close to services, jobs in downtown. I think this really captures a lot of what we've been discussing throughout this process, so keeping that one will be important. Encouraging home occupations as an important part of Orono's economic base and lifestyle. I think this again goes back to that conversation about just allowing people to freedom of choice and working from home and allowing things. Some of the home occupation standards have been streamlined, but I think there needs to be a lot more conversation and discussion there.
Definitely, things have changed a hell of a lot since who did this plan.
Again, cluster development standards as an option in the designated growth area. While that was done, it has only been used once in the designated growth area. We have one on my desk that I'm currently reviewing, so that would be the second time, but I think re-looking at some of these standards are going to be something that's important as we move through this. And I'm kind of speeding through this because I recognize that a lot of these are either things we've already discussed in other chapters or things that just probably need to be scrapped, so.
Either way,
So this one is interesting and kind of gets back to the conversation we were just having about these Main Street properties. I'm on 7 in the land use section, by the way.
Yep.
So it says the town will amend the land use ordinance to create flexibility in the use and reuse of properties in the MDR district along Main Street, which are these ones here. It talks about adopting a Main Street overlay, which, as we know, has not had the desired impact. I think what is we should actually look to do is just directly allow some of the like office type uses that are currently only allowed if you preserve historic character and follow these optional standards. In general, re-looking at the uses that are allowed in this section and making sure that folks can have the incomes needed to maintain their properties might be appropriate as we're going through this comp plan. And I think I'm more just capturing the conversation, hopefully, but if anyone is thinking that I'm off base, let me know.
What did you just say about ensuring people have the incomes to keep up?
So this is really in response to these Main Street properties, and some of this is just allowing flexibility in the use of the properties. So these properties are actually mostly medium density residential, and so don't allow a lot of the like office uses that we might want right here, so you can walk into downtown and some of these other goals that we've been discussing, but then also potentially allowing for a higher density of apartments or something within these buildings, or offices or what have you within these buildings, so that people can create an income from them and upkeep the property or maintain the property might be.
Oh, I see.
appropriate.
Okay.
Yep. Currently, you're only allowed to do an office there if you are following those optional standards that I
Yeah.
talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Where could we maybe encourage people to and support people creating offices regardless of whether they're on Main Street or not? Or how does that work in other like Webster Side or Sailor?
So currently, if you were in Webster Side or Sailor or in any of these MDR, you would only be able to do an office if you were doing it as like a home occupation, which has some very specific and strict standards around how many employees you can have. I think it's only 2 outside of the family, and some other standards around it needs to look like a residence from the outside and things like that. I think especially in these areas within that 1 mile radius of downtown, we might consider doing more like office type uses, lawyers' offices and things like that, so that we're getting more people in town during the day that can utilize our businesses. I think this is probably where that's most appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that, to me, that feels like on the more major roads though?
Mhm.
Like not just within a mile of downtown.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
I mean,
some-
not a home office, but like.
A salon. You wanna like start
Oh, yeah.
like a barber shop or a salon, like could you do that in your home? Like, what if you really
yeah.
want to and
I
you have the
mean,
space? for
unless,
it?
yeah, but that's not necessarily having more than 2 employees outside of your.
Doesn't it also have to do with customers?
Yes, so one of the other things we review from the planning board, because you're also required to go to planning board for most home occupations if you're seeing clients, is how many clients you're seeing a day, and it's usually no more than like 1 an hour. So like therapist's office works really well, or a hair salon could potentially work well. Barber, you're usually faster, so.
Slow barber,
What was
a
that?
slow barber.
A slow barber. But
A mile to downtown would take in quite an area though. That would take in Webster Side.
Mhm.
Well, I'm just thinking about like encouraging this 15-minute city idea. Like,
Yeah.
why can't we just have a small grocer? in Webster side? Like, why, I mean,
Used to be.
I live in that house.
Oh, is that where you live?
But we're selling maple syrup.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I'm thinking about the vision of what we want the town to be. And encouraging this type of development could be really advantageous to the vision.
Yeah. I'm saying as sort of the objective here is rather than this overly broad objective, consider creating offices, salon, barbershops, or other flexible uses that meet everyday needs within about a mile of downtown with certain performance standards. You know, we can control potentially what roads they're located on and things like that. But I think your point is capturing a lot of what we've discussed. Yeah. Generally amending the standards of the C2 zoning district to be more consistent with the purpose of a mixed-use walkable district. I think this is one of those areas where everything was adopted and it's still potentially not functioning the way that we're anticipating that it would have. So I think there needs to be some conversation, and I'm thinking the C2 district, you know, Aroma Joe's and all of those things. That's very much a car-centric area. We adopted these pedestrian standards that sometimes can't be utilized because there's an easement with DOT on many of the properties through that area. I think that came up on yours or maybe the one next to you. Yeah, so I think we need to have just some conversation about what the vision for that area will look like. I'm not sure what folks are thinking. I think, I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind some of these discussions having a broader audience if we have more people on the
Yep.
committee.
Okay. And I
I
think,
don't want to make all these decisions tonight. I think Judd has a lot to say, and Catherine and others, so.
okay. I think a lot of these, I'm not trying to speed through this by any means, but I think a lot of these are sort of related to those things, and my anticipation is that I'll come prepared to the May meeting with a future land use plan that incorporates the conversations that we've been having thus far and the vision statement that we came up with, and has some recommendations for the vision for these specific areas of Orono for feedback. And then, as I mentioned in my email a few months ago, the goal with the future land use plan is that the committee gets to a point where you all are comfortable with that. And then we do have a future land use workshop planned with the public to get feedback on that vision for each of these
Right, because you would
neighborhoods of Orono.
give them something well in advance that they could digest and
Yep.
hopefully come prepared. Is this a good break point then?
I think this is a good break point. I think we would then be moving on to transportation and having some more conversations about the relevance of those objectives, which I think are all still very relevant, so.
Yep. Do you have enough, you got enough with your, the mission and vision statement? You're gonna amend this, come back with another, you're amending things as we go?
Yep.
Just give us something else to talk about
Yep.
next time, yeah.
Yep, and I think at our next meeting, I will have an initial draft of the future land use plan to share, so that will include again, that vision for certain areas of Orono and what we want that to look and feel like, as well as potential ordinance changes to accomplish that vision, or at least suggested ordinance changes, and that will be for your feedback. I anticipate that we'll likely take not just one, but probably 2 meetings to have conversations about that.
What are we looking at for a date for May?
May 7th, wasn't it?
Yes, so if we stick with our first Wednesday schedule, that would be May 7th.
What happens to the person on this corridor here that bought one of those historic homes because they wanted it to be in a historic neighborhood? And if you change it to allowing businesses on their neighbors on each side, what recourse would they have? You know?
Well, I think, so what the previous comp plan committee suggested was doing those optional set of standards to allow businesses so that it still would look like a residence from the outside. I think you can add some teeth to those design standards and keep that it looks like a residence from the outside, especially if you're getting, you know, some sort of perk like additional units or allowable office or other kinds of uses. I think that's appropriate, but also to the point that some folks have already made, I think for some of these neighbors, it might be more helpful to them if the properties were maintained. And so that's the conversations we'll need
Trying
to
to
have.
cut back to the guy that came in to redevelop his property to put in 2 apartments or something. It seems like some of the abutters were saying, wait a minute, we didn't buy, we're all families here.
Yeah.
Didn't they fight back on both sides of those?
I'm trying to remember which
Remember
project.
the one that he put in 2 townhouses or 2 apartments, and he said it's just gonna be like, for let, it was gonna be furnished units?
That cryptic house one?
Yeah,
Is that
the
really-
Yeah.
house, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But it seemed like there were a couple of letters that were saying, we didn't buy into this area. We bought this as a family neighborhood, historic family neighborhood. Maybe I got it wrong.
I think this was before my time.
It was before.
Let's try to remember that. Yeah. Yeah, because Alpin, I'm trying to remember who showed up. Alpin Glow.
But,
Yeah.
but the developer,
Yeah.
he pacified everybody, saying there
Yeah.
would be nobody really there.
Yeah, right. Well, you have a background, your interest is in historic preservation, so give us another version to consider that'll
Okay.
kind of get where we're.
Yeah.
Doing that.
Okay, so we'll break next time. We'll talk more about land use in detail, and then we do need to address transportation and utilities as part of our last review of this audit document. So at some point.
Good. I potentially am away that week, but I would remote in, but.
Okay.
I'm away the next 3 Wednesdays.
Oh, okay,
Just realized I have work things that come up for all of them.
okay,
Yeah, but that May meeting, I think I'll be on the road.
okay.
But Jeff, he could, if he's able, he could chair in my, I'll remote, but. Somebody's here, it's sometimes easier to
Okay.
manage, so. We'll go with that as tentatively, but I don't expect to be here. All right, thank you, folks.
Well, the next meeting then will be on the transportation section that
We'll skip the transportation for a little bit while we break for land use, and then we'll come back to it, so.
Yeah, just, you should be here for
That
that.
you can- Yes,
the 3 minutes in a row. It's gonna be.
yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
There's the most vested into.
Yeah.
Well, I know. That happens in the course of. That's how we define meeting.
Yes.
Is it? That's, and. How it actually owns and really doesn't look like.
We're